L before. It would be like L agile.
Okay.
All right. So what is HTML? HTML is a hypertext markup language. It is used so that we can have more than just text sitting on a page. So for example, everything that you see on the web uses HTML. You have images, links, tables, lists, all those great things. So HTML is what we use in order to mark up that language. Now, with every HTML document, there is a certain document structure. So we'll go ahead and look at what that looks like. So as you go through your courses, this is VS Code, by the way. This is the text editor I use. I'm going to create a new file called index.html. Give me 1 second. Make sure everyone's on mute here. If you're not on mute, could you please mute yourself just so we don't get any background noise? And then you can unmute yourself when you have questions, of course. All right, so we are looking at a regular HTML file. It's going to follow all the same structure. So we'll have doc type HTML, and this is just simply saying that this document type is HTML. And then we have our tags. So before I start jumping into tags, let me zoom in here. Right here, you'll see, I call them carets. They're greater than, less than signs. So this is indicating that this is an HTML tag, right? These little carets. And in between those carets is the element that you are creating. So here, I'm creating an HTML element. Every tag element in HTML has an opening and a closing. So this tag right here is considered the opening tag. This right here, whenever you see a caret with a backslash, that means that's the closing tag. So to close it, we just do those symbols and then the element name inside. So this is opening and closing the HTML, right? So inside of our HTML tag, we'll have our head. Inside of the head is where you'll have links to other files, your meta tags. Anything inside of the head is not visible on the page. Underneath our head, we have our body. This is where you're going to spend the majority of your time when you're writing in your HTML. Everything that you see on the web is going to be inside of the body. And that is essentially the basic structure of an HTML file. So we have our doc type, HTML, head, and body. So does anyone remember what I said, what the head is for? What goes inside the head?
That's all the pages metadata.
Right. Oh, well, that's inside the header, actually. So there is a difference between head, header, and headings. So most commonly when you're writing a navigation bar, it's going to be inside of the header, which is actually inside of the body. Now, a way to remember that is navigation is something that you see on the page. So that's going to be inside of the body. The head is what you use in order to like link other pages. Like if you're linking your CSS file, you use your head. Or if you have some meta tags, you would put that in the head. Or the title of your page would be in the head. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we'll keep on moving along here. So with that, within that, we have our structure elements. We have a div, which is used to create a generic container for content. We have our header, which we just talked about. It's new to HTML5. It's used to mark the header part of the body. There's only one per document, so you can't have multiple headers. Footer is the counterpart to the header, and it outlines the footer content in the document. This is where you most commonly see on sites where they have their social media links or they have the contact customer service number, things of that nature. That's usually in the footer. We have our nav, which is used to mark up a navigation area, and we have our section, which provides structure around a block of content, grouping in a logical format. So you can divide your page. So the way HTML works is you can divide it kind of like you do an outline to an essay paper. So let's go ahead and play with some of these. So inside of my header, I'm going to create a nav. And for now, I'm just going to write the words navigation bar, and we're going to replace this later with an actual functioning navigation bar. So we have a navigation bar. Let's say that we wanted to create a few sections. So I'm going to go ahead and create a section here. I have my opening and my closing. Do a couple sections. If I can spell it. Here we go. And then maybe I want to go ahead and have a footer at the bottom of my page. And in there, I'm going to go ahead and put, I'll replace this later. I'm going to write the text social media. In this section, I'm going to write the text about me. This section, I'm going to say my skills. Let's create one more section. Contact me or something. And then in my head, I'll go ahead and create a title. And I'll just put my name. And then we can go ahead and see what this all looks like. So here I have just a simple HTML file here that's going to translate into a simple website. So if we look here. If we see here, we have the file here. We have navigation bar, about me, my skills, contact me, social media. Now, it doesn't look that special, right? We have all these different tags, but we're not visually seeing a difference between them. That's when we're going to get into our other elements where it's kind of like styling, but not necessarily. That CSS takes care of that. So we'll go ahead and move on. Does anyone have any questions about what I've written so far? Okay, I'm going to take silence as a no. So we'll go ahead and keep going. So now we'll go ahead and discuss content elements. So this is where heading tags get introduced, and you've probably seen them before. We have H1 through H6. H1 is going to be the largest, and then it goes down to H6 being the smallest. We also have our paragraph element, which is indicated with a P. We have italicized, which can be written as two different ways. We have EM versus I. So EM stands for emphasis. So essentially, let's say the website's for the visually impaired. Emphasis is going to look a little bit different as italicized, but visually it looks the same. Oops. Bold is strong. Ordered list is OL with list items inside. So we'll take a look at this, but essentially you're going to have nesting here. So you'll have your OL tags, the opening and closing, which is indicating this is an ordered list. And then inside of that, you'll have your list item tags, which is the things in your list. So let's say you're listing your favorite foods, and it's listed 1, 2, 3, pizza, ice cream, burgers, for example. Unordered list is the same format, except you put a UL instead of an OL, and that's going to show bullet points. Images are a little bit special in the sense that they are self-closing and they have an attribute. So an attribute you can kind of think of as like a property or a characteristic of that element. The attribute that the image element uses is source, and that's essentially saying where is the source of this image. And we'll go into more detail once we get into practice with that. Lastly, we'll discuss anchor tags, which is used for linking. This is what you're going to use if you want anything in your site to link to something else, to link to another page, to link to a different website, to link to your email. You're going to use an anchor tag, and this is what we're going to use for our navigation. Anchor tags also have attributes, so we'll go ahead and look at these. So let's start off with our heading tags. Let's say I want my About Me section to use H1. I want that to have H1. Okay, so if I save that and I refresh it, we can see the difference here. So now these have changed because I have put the H1 tag on them. Next, we'll go ahead and put some paragraph tags. Let's say I want to put some information in here. I'm going to use Lorem Ipsum for some dummy text.
In VS Code, you can just type lorem and put a number after it, and then hit tab, and it'll automatically insert the lorem text.
Oh, really? Lorem and then a number?
Yeah, the number of words, I think.
Oh, okay, got you. All right, that's cool. I did not know that. All right, so we have some dummy text there. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the same dummy text everywhere else. All right, so we have some heading tags and we have some paragraph. So let's look and see what that looks like. Oh, okay. So this looks a little funny, right? So that means that I did not close a tag properly because this is still adapting the H1 tag. So let's look at my code here. Oh, you'll see right here, I forgot a slash here. So all of this adapted the H1 tag. So that's one thing that you can use for debugging when you see that something's adapting something else. You know, okay, I didn't close something properly. There, I did not close the contact me H1 tag properly, so the paragraph adapted that. So now that I've changed that, we can go ahead and see the corrections. All right, so any questions on what I've done so far before we jump into anchor tags and images? All right, we'll go ahead and keep going. So as I was discussing before, we're going to go ahead and use anchor tags inside of our navigation in order to link it to other things. So let's go ahead and pretend that I have multiple pages on my website. Let's say I had a portfolio page. Let's say I had a calendar page or appointments page so you can book appointments. Let's just pretend I have those pages. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and use an anchor tag in order to link to these pages. So we'll have our opening and we'll have our closing. Now, earlier I said that anchor tags had attributes. The attributes that they use is href, which is similar to source in the fact that it's pointing to where the location is. So here, if I wanted to link it to a relative file, meaning one inside of my root directory, and by root directory I mean my project folder, I'm just going to go ahead and put the file path. Since these files are directly inside of the root directory, I'll just put the file name. And then between the tags, I'll write some text, and that text is going to be what's clickable. And once that's clicked, it's going to take me here. So I'll put appointments, And I'll go ahead and create another one for portfolio. And I'll have one, let's say, up here for my home page, which is just going to be my index.html. And there we have it. So if we look here and refresh, we see now that these have turned into clickable links. So that when I click, it's going to take me to appointment.html. Whoever has a dog in the background, can you mute yourself? Thank you. All right. And then if we click on portfolio, we'll go ahead to portfolio.html. Now, there's nothing on this page because I didn't write any HTML on these files. But as you can see up here, that it's taking me to those files. So let's say if I wrote something here, start off with my structure, right?
All the legacy stuff has an L before it. Okay. That expensive. Thanks, dude.
We see that the text appears. So this is how you can get make a website with multiple pages, right? All right, so another thing that we discussed is an image tag. An image tag is going to have an attribute just like the anchor tag. So just like we had href, we're going to have source instead. So I am going to add one. If I do image, now it's self-closing, so it doesn't require a closing tag. So we'll do image source equals, and then inside of here, we'll have the link to the image. Now, if I had a file in here that was an image, let's say me.jpg, I could just put me.jpg in here, and that image would pop up. Since that image doesn't exist in this directory, I'm going to go ahead and use one that exists online. So you can grab images from the internet. Let's say I want to Google puppies. I can just grab an image, right-click it, and do copy image address. I'll go back here, and I'm going to put that image address in between my quotations for my source attribute. It's a really long address, but that's the address. So we'll go ahead and save that, and we'll look at our page, and there it is. Now, with anchor tags, we used a relative file, but we can go ahead and do, use one off the internet as well. So let's say down in your footer, you wanted to add an anchor tag to, let's say your company had a Facebook page. So I'm going to go ahead and do another anchor tag. And what is the attribute for anchor tag?
href.
Which one?
href.
Yep, href. So let's say we are tagging it to our Facebook page, and we'll have www.facebook.com, and then whatever the business name is, you'll put like the whole link in there.
An attribute.
I'm sorry?
Href is not the attribute for that anchor tag?
It is the anchor tag.
Okay.
Yeah, you were right. And then here we would write Facebook, right? Or whatever you wanted to write here. And then if we look here, we see that Facebook's here. And then, oh, I probably wanted all of the Facebook page. Hold on. The whole HTTPS shebang. So I'll just replace that.
Nice. Google's got one too.
with that.
I don't know if they let you play with it.
And now it takes me to Facebook. Now, let's say you wanted your customer or user or whatever to open that page, but on a separate tab because you still want your site to still appear. So you'll use another attribute called target. And in order to opening it to another tag, inside of quotations, you just do underscore blank. So if we go back, we click on Facebook, you see that it opens in a separate tab. All right. Any questions on anchor tags? That seems to be the most confusing for most beginners and also images. But does anyone have any questions on anything else so far? Or about anchor tags or images?
I have a question about the different list types. I know there's a
Yes.
type, and it was in HTML4. It's called a dictionary list. Has that been deprecated for HTML5?
I'm not familiar with it, so I'm not too sure. But thank you for reminding me about going over that. So with the ordered list that we discussed earlier, you would have OL saying it's an ordered list. Then we're closing our ordered list here. Then inside of our ordered list is where we have our list items, which is indicated by LI. So let's say we had a couple of these. And then let's say, let's go with food again. I go with pizza, cupcakes, burgers. All right. So if we save that, we can see the ordered list here. Now, same with unordered list, exact same format, except instead of OL, we use UL. And you can see the difference here. Cool. Everyone cool with that? Any questions? Okay, everything seems to be okay. So we'll keep on going then. We'll go ahead and jump into CSS. So now we have a cool little HTML file. We have a simple little website. Let's go ahead and make this thing look nice. So by doing that, we'll use CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It was developed as a way to style HTML and create reusable styles called rules. So let's say you had a certain font, color, size, style that you wanted to use on one section of your site, but you also wanted to use it on different parts of your sites. You'll create a CSS rule for that and just apply it to different places instead of having to manually write it out every single time for that specific element. Now, you can use a style element in your HTML and put all your CSS in there, or you can use a separate CSS file and link them to the HTML file. I'm going to go ahead and be teaching you how to use a separate file because that's what's common practice. And if you have your CSS inside of your HTML, inside of a style tag, it's going to get long and messy and hard to read. So we'll go ahead and do them separately. Now, the reason why it's called cascading is because the styles from a parent element also apply to its descendants. So you can kind of think of it like as parent and child. We inherit our genes from our parents. I inherited my dark hair from my parents, things of that nature. So, for example, in code language, if I apply a font style to the HTML element, anything inside of the HTML element is going to have the same font style applied to it. So if we look at our code here, let me zoom out. Oop, too much. All right, so if we look here and I apply a font to HTML, everything inside of the HTML would be applied, right? Because this is where it ends. Same for H1. If I had one for H1, everything inside of every single H1 tag would have that same style. And we'll look at this in more depth once we have more examples. So let's go ahead and create our CSS file. So I'm going to call it style.css. You can call it whatever you like, just make sure it's a CSS file. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link that file to my HTML file so that I know that they can communicate with each other. So where do I put linking tags?
The head.
Yep, in the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll put link. Now, the link is self-closing, so it doesn't require a closing tag, but there are a couple attributes. Does anyone happen to know what they are already?
You have type, and then you have the source, I think.
So you're
And-
thinking a script tag. With the link tag, we have rel, which is relation. And what you said is right, but for the script tag, which kind of works the same way. So with CSS, you do rel, which is relation, and you want to say style sheet. You also want to do href and say where it's at. So same thing in all hrefs, you're just going to put a file path. Here it's directly inside of our root directory, so I'm just going to put style.css. Now you can put type, and you just say text.cs/css, but it's not necessary. I tend to leave it out. So here we are linking our CSS to our HTML. So now that everything I write in my CSS style is going to apply to my HTML. Now, if you notice, I only put it inside of my index HTML. So that means that my portfolio and app are not tied to the CSS. I'm not worried about that since I didn't make pages out of these, but if you have a website with multiple pages, you want to make sure that your CSS is linked to all of them. Right now, it's just linked to the index. Any questions about linking? All right, we'll keep going then. So some CSS properties you'll deal with is the display property, and there's 4 values that you can have for it. You have block, which makes an element a block and won't let anything sit next to it on a page. So let's say you had a couple of images right next to each other and the display was block. They won't sit next to each other anymore. Now they will all have their own row. Display inline block makes the element a block, but it will allow other elements to sit next to it on the same line. So they're still considered a block, but instead of being like right next to each other, they're a little bit separated, but still on the same line. Display inline makes the element sit on the same line as another element, but without formatting it like a block. And display none makes everything disappear. So if you put none, it doesn't show up on the page. So that's maybe an instance that you want to have once you're incorporating JavaScript into your page and you're saying, if this certain situation arises, we won't display this. So that's when you'll start connecting all the elements together. But for now, we're just worried about CSS and HTML. So we have block, inline, and none. Next, we have the position property. So this one also has different values that you could have. Absolute, the element is positioned relative to its first position ancestor element. Static is default value. So if you didn't even put a position property, static is just going to be the default value for all of them. Relative, the element is positioned relative to its normal position. So left 20 pixel adds 20 pixels to the element's left position. And position fixed, the element is positioned relative to the browser window. So that is dependent on your browser window. Is like when you open and close it and make it smaller. Like for example, it went over here. So let's say we're looking at this relative to its browser window, mean browser window size, right?
Yeah.
All right. Then this is very important, the CSS box model. So in here, this is kind of how everything's positioned in CSS. We have our content area, so that means your element. Within that, you have your height and your width. Outside of that, you have padding. You have top, right, bottom, left. So you can target these separately. Like let's say you want your top to be different than your bottom or your left or your right. You can target those separately, or you can just write the word padding and then that would make them all equal. So let's say if you did padding 50 pixels, then it's 50 pixels on the top, bottom, right, left. And the same for all the rest of these. So outside of the padding, we have our border, and outside of that, we have our margin. So this is kind of key to remember when you are working with CSS and you're trying to figure out why something is in a certain place. Maybe you have some padding on it that did something that you didn't expect, or you're messing with the border and you forgot that the border was between the padding and the margin. So this right here is good to remember or print out or just have it available to you when you're dealing with CSS. So let's go ahead and play with some properties, right? So I'm going to go ahead and target some elements. Let's say I want to target my body element. Now, since I'm targeting my body, that means it's going to affect everything that's within my body tags. So in here, I'm going to put, and the breakdown of CSS syntax is you write the element that you're targeting, and then you'll have a set of curly brackets. Inside of the curly brackets is where you're going to have your properties with their values. So let's say I wanted to change the background color. I want it to be green. So you'll put the property name with a colon and then the value with a semicolon.
I couldn't have gotten any luckier.
And let's say I also want everything to be centered. I'm going to do text align center. So if we save that, oh, I need to save my index page. We can see that everything is centered and it has the background color green. Now let's try to target specific elements. Let's say I want all my H1 tags to be the font color white. So I will target my element H1, and there I'm going to say color white. Save that. All the H1 tags have now turned white. Okay. So this is how you can directly change an element. And let's say, and this will do for all of them, right? Every single H1 tag that you have. And now I'm going to target the image. So this is going to apply to every image tag that I have. So in here, let's say I want my width to be 90, well, let's say 75%. Take a look at that. You see that it grew. Let's say I want the width to be 25%. And there it got smaller. All right, so this is how you can target the elements directly. Any questions on this so far before we jump into classes and IDs?
I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Can I put a GIF file on the background?
I believe so. I think that's valid. I'm not 100% sure, but I think you should be able to put GIFs in the background.
Like the whole background?
Yeah, so if you want to put an image on the background, you just do background image,
Okay.
and then it follows the format URL with parentheses, And that just means where it is. So if it's like
Where
a,
the file is, yes.
right, exactly, like href and source. And then you put that in there, and then you put your semicolon. So that's how you can get a background image. And if you're wondering, there's so many CSS properties out there. These I have memorized because I use them often. But if there's any properties that you're unaware of or you want to just look up all the different ones that exist, a really good website for that is W3 Schools. And you can just go to CSS here. And then you can see all the different CSS for the different things that you have. So let's say that you're playing with text, right? You can look at all the different CSS formatting for text. We have text align, text decoration, text transform, indent, letter spacing. All of these properties exist, right? So you can go to this website and it has it all listed out here, and you can play with those and, you know, see how you want your site to be formatted. Same with a bunch of other stuff, backgrounds, borders, margins, things of that nature. So this is a good website. I would highly recommend bookmarking it. I use it a lot for CSS because there's no way I can remember all the properties that exist. All right, so are everyone cool? Yeah, no problem. Everyone cool with targeting elements?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to classes and IDs. So classes and IDs, they are written kind of in the same way as far as syntax. So our HTML, let's say we wanted to add a class to our paragraph element, right? Let's say I want to have a class here. And for classes and IDs, you treat them as attributes. So they're going to go in the opening tag of your element. So inside of my opening tag, I'll write the word class, set it equal, and then inside of quotations is going to be the name of my class. So let's say I wanted to name this class Bright. Okay. So I'm going to name my class Bright. And the way that I write that in HTML, in CSS is period and then the class name. So since this is a class, I'm using a period and my class name is Bright, and then the rest stays the same. Curly brackets, and then you write your properties. So for Bright, I'm going to do the color. It's a bright color, yellow. Okay. So if we look at what that looks like, oh, I didn't save my HTML. So if you see here, I refreshed it and nothing happened as I expected. So another debugging is, okay, what did I do wrong? Oh, I didn't save this file. And with VS Code, if you have like a little circle here, it indicates that you didn't save it. So I'm going to save it. And now it's yellow. Okay. Let's say with classes, they're reusable. So I can reuse them for anything. So let's say I wanted this list item to have the class Bright too. You see it's yellow there. So classes are reusable and they're going to be extremely handy when you're building sites and projects and applications, especially if you want to reuse the same formatting in different places. Same if you're like working on your other pages and you want it to all kind of have the same theme, you'll use classes. Now let's go ahead and discuss IDs. So for an ID, kind of the same format, right? I'm going to write in my opening tag, instead of class, I'm going to write ID. I'm going to set that equal to my ID name. And I'm going to put the ID name to be, let's say dark. And then in my class, instead of a period, I will use a pound symbol, number symbol, hashtag, whatever you want to call it. And then the ID name, dark, same format. with the curly brackets, and let's say I want the background color to be black, and I want the font color to be white. Okay. If we go ahead and save that and hit refresh, we see that this changed, right? It has our background color black and our font color white. Now, the difference between IDs and classes is that you should only have one ID. Now, as far as CSS is concerned, it doesn't make a difference. So if I put dark here too, right? I was going to apply it to that one. I can reuse IDs in CSS's eyes, but you don't want to do that. You want to use classes if you're planning on reusing things. IDs are specific to one thing, and that's going to come really handy and important once you start working in JavaScript. And let's say you wanted to grab an element by its ID. If there's multiple elements with the same ID, it's going to freak out. So I'm like, okay, which one do you want? So it's important that there's only one ID, one unique ID. Classes is for reusability. Any questions on IDs and classes? Everyone's good there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, that wraps up our lecture for today on basics of HTML and CSS. If you have any questions, this is the time to ask them. Otherwise, you can reach out to your instructor or mentors via Slack and ask them directly as well. So last call for questions.
Sure. Is there any information or videos on the robot store that I could look up or maybe have access to?
I'm not exactly sure if they're specific to Robot Store project, but if you go to the student repo page and you just type in repo.exeterlms.com, if there's certain things that the Robot Store project is asking you to do, you can just go to videos, and then yeah, we have front-end foundations, so you can watch those, or you can watch the tutorial videos. But there's a bunch in there that goes over different topics. So you
Okay, good.
can see the different topics and pick which one pertains to you. But I'd also recommend watching the front-end foundations video.
Yes, that one was helpful. That the instructor was helpful. Okay, good. And then just a question: Is PJ not around anymore, or?
No, PJ is no longer the instructor. I'm the instructor for SCI.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, he's doing other things.
Right. Just because I know that per the Slack channel, I know that he had posted stuff on that project, and he mentioned reach out to me if you can, but I didn't want to do so because he's not here. So makes sense.
Oh yeah, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to your mentor if you have specific questions on it.
Okay, good. And then yeah, that sounds good. How you doing, Eric? So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey,
Anyone
Cassandra?
else? Yep.
What OS are you working on, if you don't mind me asking? See, I got a Chromebook, but the what is it called? The Visual Studio is not compatible.
Oh, yes. You can work on, since you have a Chromebook, I think Cloud9 is just like an internet thing. It's just based off the internet, and you can work on there. Because I think you might have a lot of compatibility problems.
Yes. Or would you recommend just getting something with the Windows operating system?
I mean, ideally, it would be great for you to have a full laptop. I'm personally a Mac user, so I'm all pro Mac. But then we have our Windows people, so of course. I feel like these days everything is geared towards Mac, but that's just my opinion. But in the meantime, because laptops are expensive, you can go to cloud9c9.io, and it's like an internet-based text editor. So you can do all your work in there.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else have questions? All right, everyone seems to be good. Okay, so that wraps up the lecture. If you guys have any questions and you think of it later, just send me a message on Slack or go ahead and message your mentor as well. All right, well, thank you for coming and have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.